know, it's because I wrote so much stuff for this, and I just could not keep it all straight in my head. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge our... Yes. Thank you to our flower team, and I'd also like to, before we go, Stella, would you like me to turn off my... Okay, podium mic is off. Great. Can I just move that out? Yes, I can. I get to do what I want. I'm up here now. I get to do what I want. I like how Dawn reminded me that if you remember last week, I had gone on about singing and standing up in front of people and singing, and then what did I do today? And that was I was just like, I want to do this song. I think we need to bring back the Welcome to Unity and have some, and then I found myself singing. And that was not intended, but yeah. So it must be because I'm getting older, but I like new tricks or something. I don't know. So we just had an introduction to Unity and New Thought class, and in preparing for that, I found a lot of things some that I had come across in my classes, in seminary, but also a lot of things that I just did through my own digging. And even after this class we had on Wednesday, my digging continued. And so that's why I decided that it's unity is the talk, it's not duality. Because even myself, I can find myself getting into that realm of something outside of me as opposed to it's all me. It's all inside, right? And I don't know if that comes from my upbringing of having, being brought up in a religion where that idea of duality exists quite strongly, and I have to constantly reinforce another thought, but it comes and it goes. And so what we talked about is monism, which is a philosophy. And it is in metaphysics. Here's what it means. It's any of various theories holding that there is only one basic substance or principle as the ground of reality, or that reality consists of a single element, which is not dualism. It's a single element. And that is really the basis of unity and New Thought teachings, is that it is one single element. And what's fascinating is that we might think that New Thought, really came around in the late 1800s, but it actually goes way back. This idea of monism goes way, way back. So we could look at Vedantism from the Hindus, which is the system of philosophy that further develops the implications in the Upanishads that all reality is a single principle, Brahman, and teaches that the believer's goal is to transcend the limitations of self-identity and realize one's unity with Brahman. Okay, so that's from the Hindu teachings, which is thousands of years old. And we can go back 500 years before Jesus was walking around talking about the kingdom of heaven is here now, it's within you. There's that mustard seed of the divinity within you. And you've heard me share that I sort of look at the word God as life itself. And so I'm going to invite you, even for those that are joining online or watching this later, my invitation is I'm going to use the word God a lot because a lot of the things that I'm going to read are quotes, and it's coming in old language. And so I want to kind of keep to their quotes, but I invite you to put any word in there or your own definition of what that might be. Source, creator, universe, Brahman, whatever that holds for you, that's completely welcome. So just bring on your own interpretation of what that is. So if we go 500 years before Jesus, there was a Greek philosopher named Parmenides. And he was really the founder of monism. That term itself is, it is that all things emanate from the one, and he is considered also the founder of ontology, which is the branch of metaphysics dealing with the nature of being. And that's really what we deal with here at Unity, is this nature of being. It's kind of like that question, I don't know about you, but I sometimes go why am I here? Right? Why? What does this all mean? There's supposed to have some meaning to all of this existence. And he was really the forerunner to the ontological argument later developed by Plato and Descartes. Then, around the same time, we have this other Greek philosopher named Heraclitus. And he held that the universal substance is an ethereal spiritual essence, and that instead of being, it should be thought that everything is becoming. So that we are actually becoming of something. So there's like a continual unfolding of who we are and the universe itself, and that every moment is a brand new moment. And, what would be really beautiful is that if we could actually leave our past, especially the stuff that ties us down and binds us, those stories, those beliefs that actually torture us as we go on in life. Anybody have those things? I know for me, they certainly exist, and there's some days it's easier than others, right? Some days are just easier than others. And so, again, as we sort of read all of this stuff, or at least as I read all of this stuff, and even as I started to read some Plato, it seems like all of the modern New Thought ideas are already done. Like they're actually not that modern. They've been around for quite a while. They've just been toyed with and massaged into different things. And so Plato actually said that reality is to be found only in mind, and that the only reality in the external world consists in its perceptibility. So what he's kind of saying, and this might explain it best, the general idea of a thing and not in the individual, that there's no reality in the individual tree or stone or man which exists on the ideal plane alone, but he felt that the reality was to be found in the idea of the tree, of the stone, and the idea of man. So there's, if I can sort of figure out what I think this means, is that there's really nothing out there. It's all just perception until we give it an idea of something. Meaning is one, and we kind of have to really take the idea of language here and understand that although language, you could think of language as the source of creation, right? The logos is the word, right? So whatever language you're speaking, whatever words you're creating, that is in fact creation. We could see it as that, but then it limits us because I can't really define what God is, just as I can't define what it isn't. It's like as soon as I try, I've already limited it. I've already tried to put it into a box, and it can't be put into a box. At least that's what we're trying to teach in unity and in New Thought principles. So Plato's idea of the tree is the perfect unchanging concept of what a tree is. So, for example, you may come across a tree that looks very different from another tree, but in your mind, when you think tree, you have a perfect idea of what a tree is. And that's that place of where ideas live in us, and it's not actually something out there. I know it's a really hard, it's a hard thing to reckon with, and it's something that probably requires a lot of meditation and prayer to really get it in your bones. So now, as we've got this Neoplatonist school, or Plato, we come across Plotinus, who was a key figure in Neoplatonism. And he was a philosopher who lived in 3rd century A.D. I know it's kind of like a history lesson today, huh? Kind of feels that way. Anyhow, it's good. His work aimed to expand and reinterpret Plato's ideas, focusing on metaphysical concepts and the relationship between the human soul and the divine. So this wasn't only going on, back then. If we think of one of the major religions in the world was Christianity, which, did what it did over the next few hundred thousand or few thousand years. So even in Greek philosophy, you can see that they had ideas that actually went into other faith traditions as well. So, and I think you could probably go back into Egypt writings and teachings and see a lot of the same sort of conversation going on. So Plotinus popularized the idea of mystic union with God. It refers to his belief that the ultimate goal of life is to achieve a deep spiritual connection with the divine source, which he called the One. For Plotinus, the One is the origin of all existence, transcending both thought and being. So we have another person, another philosopher, teacher, talking about this idea of one, this oneness, this wholeness that we can not only live into, but that we actually are. That there is no separation except the separation that we end up creating, which I feel a lot comes from our language limitation, right? As soon as we start to think of something out there and I'm in here, boom, we're done, we're separated, that's it, right? And then, at least for me, I have to try to bring myself back into that place of, no, it's not like that. It's actually like, no, it is me too, I am that. So he believed that this union can be achieved through inner contemplation and the purification of the soul. In this state of oneness, individuals experience a direct, ineffable connection to the divine, going beyond intellectual understanding. The idea of mystical union greatly influenced other world religions going forward. Then I started to read some Butterworth. Eric Butterworth. So for those that don't know, Eric Butterworth was a unity minister, probably one of our real ideas, one of our teachers that really stood in principle. And he wrote the book, Discover the Power Within You. Has anybody here read that? A few people, yes? This was on Oprah Winfrey's top 10 list of one of the most influential books in her life. Maya Angelou, for those that know Maya Angelou, read this book and discovered that she was loved by God from that. And she actually does the foreword in one of the recent reprints of the Discover the Power Within You. I know when I read it, it really helped me to begin to hone my understanding of unity and this idea of oneness. And Butterworth actually says that he owes the Discover the Power Within You to the teachings of Meister Johannes Eckhart, who was a Roman Catholic priest, and he was very much a simple parish guy, ran a congregation. He was intuitive, so when he was in the pulpit, he spoke through the promptings of an inner voice, is what he would say. And his immediate concept of God was so startling that it was a little bit too radical back then in the 1300s. And so he was eventually charged with heresy in 1327, right? Of course, because he had some different ideas of how things should be. And he was never convicted of it, but he was charged with that. And originally I thought I'd read somewhere that he had 14 theses that he had written. It was actually 28 theses that he had written that were all destroyed. Yeah, and only one or two of his writings actually survived. And so Eckhart's teaching was the axiom that God is being, and he stated that if God is all existence, it is impossible that anything should exist apart from God. Now that means you understand that? Everything. Even the stuff you don't like. That's what that means. It doesn't just mean, the good things. It means everything is from that. Now, we say this in truth, that there was only one presence and one power, God the good, omnipotence, omniscience, omnipresence, which is, in other words, all-powerful, all-knowing, and everywhere all at once. That's what we believe at Unity. That's new thought. Butterworth also shares that many good students of truth have affirmed something like this all through their truth studying years. Anybody here have that belief as they've studied Unity, as they studied new thought? Yeah. And yet somehow we say this thing and still find room for reality of problems right? For the reality of problems and people and situations that don't really work for us. Right? So on one hand, we say this, and then on the other hand, we have this other thing that goes on where it's like, that, right? Get them. But in the clear, absolute thinking of Eckhart, there was only one God. God was being. And it's not this idea of, how can I put this, where we're, presence, this idea of presence, like, oh, I'm going to go here because I can find my presence, or I just need to become a little more present, or, I'm going to go do this class because I'm going to bring in the presence. It's like, no, the presence is always there. There is no going somewhere to have the presence. But again, like, I totally empathize. It's a hard thing to realize that at all times you are present. But what might not be present is your thoughts, right? They may be off on something that happened yesterday, or what am I going to do tomorrow for lunch, or, whatever else conversation might be going on in your head, or this thing that I had, this person said something a week ago, and, the story goes on, right? We can have all these things that take us out of feeling as if we're present, but really presence is always with us, readily available. Eckhart said this, he had this tremendous idea of nothing is as close to me as God. God is nearer to me than I am to myself. God presence is my being. Well, this is a Catholic priest in the 1300s. So you can see why he was pushing the boundaries and was, it's like, we got to shut this guy up because he's not talking the same way we are, where this idea of we've got to, bow down and fall to our knees to some God out there idea. He was talking, no, it's here. It's right here, right now, as Jesus was, as the Greek philosophers were 500 years before then, as the Hindus were teaching 1,000 years before then. See, it's one sort of train of thought, and we're constantly battling against it, at least I feel. Butterworth goes on to share, creation is a continuous activity of God, and the creation is so essential that God becomes God only by outpouring himself into individual existence. Eckhart said it this way, this is really great. God expects but one thing of you. Really? There's only one thing? Please, what is the one thing? God expects but one thing of you, and that is that you should come out of yourself insofar as your created being and let God be God in you. That's all there is to do. Just get out of your head and let God be God in you. Let the universe be the universe in you. Let creation be the creation in you. Just allow yourself to be. In other words, stop thinking of yourself as being created by God or that God is the creator. Instead, forget about all this. Right? Just forget that there's any differentiation, that there's any separation between you and God. And let God be God in you. That's all there is. That's it. Sounds so easy, doesn't it? Like, if we took that, we don't ever need to come here again on a Sunday. like ever. If we could just live in that state of beingness all the time. I'm not suggesting that. I love seeing you every Sunday. So maybe we could just come and hang out and eat cake, drink coffee, talk about the week, play some tunes, sing, dance, So he goes on to say that the very best and utmost attainment in this life is to remain still and let God act and speak in thee. The most creative act is to let go and let it happen. Eckhart also said, between God and man alone, there is no difference, no separation, but oneness. That's pretty simply put. Like I don't know how easier it is to say that. That's it. And so you might think, oh, if I could only change God's will so that he would want to do something for me. But the will of the individual is identical to the will of God. That's the thing. It's like we have to understand that if we're operating from that place, then we are the will of God, and God is the will of us. And it's like Khalil Gibran says, it is thy desire in us that desireth. It is the desire in us that desireth. So it is that oneness. It is that connection. I'm pretty sure Eckhart said some things that were controversial, it sounds like, right? Put people on the tip of their ears, so to speak. He says that God can no more do without us than we can do without him. God can no more do without us than we can do without God. It's like codependency. We need each other, so to speak. And there's this great example of it, and I think this comes from George Eliot. "'Tis God gives skill, but not without men's hands. He could not make Antonio Stradivari's violins without Antonio." Huh? You see what that means? It's like, yeah, I've got this gift, and I think of our two great performers today. They have this gift that they're able to share with us, and yet God would not be able to share that gift without their sharing that gift. You see, it's a coexistence. It is truly oneness. It is unity. Small u, just unity. And then he gives this great soliloquy. "It's my humility that gives God his divinity." It's my humility that gives God his divinity. This is from Eckhart. So again, guy in the 1300s preaching this stuff, just radical. This is his soliloquy. "God's peculiar property is giving, but God cannot give if God has nothing to receive those gifts. I, by my humility, do make God give. And since giving is God's own peculiar property, I, by my humility, give God his property. The would-be giver needs to find a taker. Without a taker, he cannot be a giver, because it is the taker by his taking that makes the man a giver. So God, to be the giver, must discover a receiver. Now, none but the humble can receive the gift of God, so God to use his godlike power of giving, will need my humility. Without humility, he can't give me aught, for I, without my humility, cannot accept his gift. Thus, it is true that I, by my humility, give God his divinity." I know it's a bit of a tongue twister in there. And it was probably a lot of tongue-in-cheek, and I think he liked to stir the pot. He comes across as somebody that probably liked to, let's see what we can cause here in people. Which is probably why I'm starting to like the guy a lot. And this is Eckhart we're speaking. And I love that Butterworth, this was the basis for Butterworth wanting to write The Power, his book. This was it. This is what spurred him on. It gave him some clarity on exactly what he needed to focus on for that writing. And so let's look at what Unity co-founder Charles Fillmore says metaphysically about oneness in his revealing word. So let's just bring it back to the founder, one of the co-founders of Unity, Charles Fillmore, for those that don't know. He's got this great book, The Revealing Word. He also has, for those that don't know, the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, which I have a copy of, which is, if you've ever seen, a thick Bible, this is equally as thick as the Bible, and it has in it every place and name in the Bible metaphysically interpreted as to what does it mean. So it's not the realist version, Moses going up the mountain. Did Moses go up the mountain, or did he go up in consciousness? This is what we're talking about. What is it, how can we interpret these things in a way where we can bring it into our own experience and our own existence? So, one, one life and one intelligence. There is one spirit, one principle of life, love, intelligence, and goodness in, through, and over all, even God, the good. So this oneness is even in God. It's in all of us. It's in our life, our love, our presence, our beingness. One mind. There is but one mind. Every individual and the various phases of character that make that individual are but states of consciousness in the one mind. And I think Brenda's talk today, or Brenda's opening remarks today, were around that. She didn't know I was going to bring this up today, so it's kind of perfect that Brenda talked about that oneness, this one consciousness of all things. One presence and one power, God. Spirit is the only presence in the universe and is the only power. One spirit mind. God is the one spirit mind in which all ideas of life, love, substance, intelligence, and power originate. So we're all drawing from the same substance, the same source, the same oneness. We are all interconnected, except that we're individual expressions of that. That's where the difference is. It's that we have an individual expression of it, but we're all drawing from the same well. And all of the faith traditions, I believe, are talking about the same thing, which at the core, in most of them, is love. So we are all that. And so I'll kind of close this off with, I thought that something that was close, but from a different perspective. And this is from Carl Rogers, who is the great American psychologist, Carl Rogers, and from his book, A Way of Being. So just in case you think that during the week I don't do a lot, just be clear, I am so stressed about Sunday talks, you have no idea. It's like my brain works like, I gotta find the next piece of information. Help me. So I was reading, I decided to open up the book and read from it again, and of course I landed on this beautiful page. He believed that individuals have within themselves an action. Hold on, before I read this, I just want to clarify something. So in seminary, I've shared this before, I took spiritual guidance, and I had 3 classes of this, and the idea was that I could be, spiritual counseling would be the word to use, but in British Columbia, you can't put counselor behind your name unless you get approved as a counselor, so I don't refer to it as that. But I took 3 terms of spiritual counseling at Unity, and one of the authors we worked with a lot was Carl Rogers. And it's because of his understanding of beingness that I think we did that. And all the time, everything was about listening. As a counselor, the job is to listen and then to play back for somebody what they said so that they know whether you actually heard them or not. And I know I've shared this before, but I always think it's something to remember and to go back to. You know, when you say something to somebody and they go, no, it's not that, it's more like this. They tell you something, you try to read it back to them, and they go, no, it's more like this. And then you say it back to them, and they either go, yeah, that's it, or it's like, no, you're not getting it, it's more like this, right? But when you get it, just as when somebody gets you, do you notice how good that feels? It's like, oh, they get me. They understood what I was saying. That's what Carl Rogers was about, was the understanding. And that's why he went on to work in the UN and to work in many issues around the world to sit with people and help them to get their communication out to one another. All right, so here's what Carl Rogers has to say, or what he believed. He believed that individuals have within themselves an actualizing tendency, an inbuilt proclivity toward growth and fulfillment. He spoke of his belief in the existence of a formative impulse in all of organic life. In his belief in an actualizing tendency, he joined the ranks of a slew of humanistic thinkers like Nietzsche, Kierkegaard, Adler, Goldstein, Maslow, and Horney, who believed in the existence within each individual of a vast potential for self-understanding and personal change. Thus, Nietzsche's first granite sentence of human perfectibility was become who you are. Become who you are. That's not that far off from truth language or new thought or unity. Become who you are. And Karen Horney, a maverick psychoanalyst, believed that just as the acorn will develop into an oak, the child will mature into an adult. The therapeutic task emanating from this position, then, is not one of construction or reconstruction or manipulation or shaping. Instead, it is one of facilitation, of removing obstacles to growth and helping to release that which has always been there. And by listening to somebody and by letting it be known that we heard them, we release that ability within them to know that they've been heard. So we're really going back to that idea that truth within us, that oneness, that we can come together as people, all in God, universe, creator, that we're all that. We are that oneness. And yesterday, we celebrated the Peace Day. And I'm going to go out on a limb here and just, this is me, so this is just my own belief, but one of the things I did not enjoy about the Peace Day conversation yesterday was the amount of times that people talked about the unpeace in the world. There wasn't a lot of conversation yesterday about all of the peace activities in the world, about all the places where there are peace, about all the places where there are love or where there is love. But there was a lot of acknowledging where there wasn't. And that to me just fuels that in the mindset of others. It doesn't mean I think you should just put your head in the sand and ignore what's going on in the world. But if we're going to be a stand for peace, if we're going to be a stand for love, then that's what we should be celebrating on a Peace Day in my mind. Let's get together and celebrate that. Oh, thank you. And it's like as MC yesterday, I started off with what Mother Teresa said. She had no time for an anti-war protest, but have a peace day, and I'm there. So let's get together and talk about peace and love. And there was some of that yesterday too. I'm not saying there wasn't, but every time somebody wanted to bring up the troubles in the world, I was like, I don't want to hear this. We know there's troubles in the world. Let's talk about how much we can love one another and be that.